And, you know, it's not doing the community, it's down in the community. Because,
It's illegal.
huh?
Because it's illegal for us.
It's-
I have the same concerns that you
Yeah,
have
it's
as a
legal,
resident.
but you know that you're gonna have an increase in your neighborhood.
I absolutely agree with you, and I totally understand where you're coming from, but those are the same concerns that we as law enforcement and parole and probation also have to figure out how to deal with. And we don't know. So there's policy, again, everything is going to have to change, and it's policy based. It's going to have to change countywide, state, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is actually going to have to change because of a legalization of something that was currently illegal with the weight and everything like that. The challenges that you feel and you suspect you're going to have as residents maybe are not the exact same challenges we feel that we're going to have, but there are problems or concerns that we have that we're going to have to figure out how we can address and combat them. And one of them would be an increase in use in streets and neighborhoods and so on and so forth. Because if we can no longer arrest them, what is our tool?
Right.
I see where you're coming from. That's what I'm saying. I don't
Then-
have a solution because I'm not in any
But if
position.
you got one house that 500 people went to in 1 week, you know they got more than
Correct.
7 grand.
Right, exactly.
Plain and
But-
simple. Other than that.
Yeah. But
Right, so-
another problem is parole and probation does not want to work with the neighborhood watch. Because we have seen several people that is out on parole, that's right in the street up here on Clay Street, and then soon as you ask parole and probation to help us to get this person out of our neighborhood, everybody is hollering that we are violating their rights.
Well, I can explain, we do want to work with parole and probation, and Sean can obviously speak more than I can, but there is a system, and the ultimate decision does not necessarily lie with parole and probation, it lies on the judge's hands. So if you say that there's something going on, I tell Patty, and say we arrest John Smith, and he's a VPI offender. Patty will email Sean first thing in the morning. John Smith was arrested, VPI offender, possession of crack cocaine. Sean will get it, send it to the agent. The agent will apply for a warrant in all likelihood, especially a VPI. And there's another change that's going on. The Commissioner's Office. Defendants are entitled to a right to a defendant. That
Right.
enhances the process. So what a judge may do is may issue a summons versus a warrant. A summons, they come in, they sign the paper, they go home, and then Sean and his agent will have a trial date a couple months down the road for that violation, and they might say, well, I mean, you can speak to it, but we do work with them. They are concerned. That's why Sean's here tonight. But there are many hands that are unfortunately in the pot.
Okay, here's one. We know there's a drug dealer.
Yes.
Every time he gets arrested,
Yes.
his car gets towed.
Yep.
Okay? Then less than 2 hours, he got the vehicle back.
Correct. There is a process that we have. We can sell it back to them for a certain amount of offenses. It's a civil process. And once that process goes, if it's the third offense, we have to file with the state's attorney's office that we would like to forfeit that vehicle. It is a civil process. The burden of proof is much lower than a criminal process. And in certain cases, the amount of effort to seize, say, a 1988 Buick does not warrant what the cost return would be. The state's attorney ultimately decides that we give that vehicle back. But for the first 3 times, they are able to get that vehicle back from us at a certain price. That's just, unfortunately, policies and procedures that we have.
But I know one for a fact, his vehicle has been
Absolutely.
towed more than 3 times in the
It-
same neighborhood.
And that's a possibility. Unfortunately, there's, defendants do have rights, and sometimes it feels as though they do have more rights than victims. But
Right.
again, there's not a lot that we can do about it at the level that we are. We have to follow what the rule is, what our agency policies are. So I understand the frustration, but again, we have to work within the boundaries that we have to try and actually get long-term results. And sometimes it does take a long. The same frustrations you have, I experienced as a police officer. You know, I mean, I've arrested this guy how many times, and you get the 10 years and they serve 7. They get the 5, they serve the 2. It's very frustrating on our end as well. So.
And just to address real fast, and I hear it every day, frustration from communities, from victims, that parole and probation doesn't do nothing, and that's what it seems like, sometimes that we don't do anything. But know this, that, I meet with our judges, you know, both the district court and the circuit court, on numerous occasions. And I can talk to them, I'm blue in the face. But the fact of the matter is they will tell me, Mr. Rutherford, I'm the judge, I wear this black robe, and I will do as I see fit. And if I feel that this individual, because I will say to them, well, you sentenced a guy to 15 years, then we came back on a violation of probation, and you only gave him a year. So why would you give him the 15 years in the beginning if you weren't going to give the 15 at the violation? And that's because I choose, you know, because that's how I choose to do my court. So, you know, while it seems like we're not doing anything, and I'm going to give you my card, and I'm sorry I only have 10 cards, so I'll leave my cards up here. You know, if there's an individual that, you know, that you say, hey, I want to call the probation about, you know, always feel comfortable calling me, and I will be happy to look into it. Okay? And since I'm the one that's running that office, they work for me. They will listen as to when I look at a case. But if there's nothing there, there's nothing there. You know, if you say, hey, I see this guy's dealing drugs in the street, but he wasn't arrested, I can't just, you know, write to a court and say, you know, the citizen called me and said he's dealing drugs in the street, because they're going to say, oh, okay, well, that's not, you know, you have to have some sort of allegation. You have to have some sort of proof.
But we do have allegations in our neighborhood. The person gets arrested.
And if they get arrested and we
They
get
get
notified.
arrested, their car get towed, then they're back on the street in less than 3 hours.
Well, understand
And
this.
then maybe 2 weeks later, it's the same thing. It's like a revolving door.
And I can assure you that every time that person's arrested, we're writing a report to the court.
Now,
I can
don't-
assure
I don't
you,
believe that.
because we have to, we get an arrest notification every morning of every offender arrested in the state of Maryland, broken down by office, broken down by probation agent. That agent writes a report to the court. What the judge chooses to do is out of our hand. I can request a warrant, but there are hundreds of times that I request a warrant, that judge comes back and says no action. No action until the pending charges are adjudicated. And that person gets arrested again, and we write another warrant. And no action till, it really depends on the judge. But if there's a person in your community, you're telling me that's a problem person, and you want to give me their name, feel free to call me and I'll see what I can do. Sometimes my name on a report to a judge might have a little bit more sway than my probation agent's name on a report. I'll look at the case, I'll review the case, and I'll see what I can do.
Are there any more questions on the Safe Streets initiative?
Back in the back.
Yes.
I hadn't been following too much until I just looked this up now that we were discussing it. And it does say that in part of this decriminalization, it's that you will still have the possibility of imposing fines if people have certain amounts.
Right.
So it's over 10.
It's between $100 and $500. And I believe on the third time, the individual has to go to court and the judge could order drug treatment, which then comes into the aspect of who monitors drug treatment, because
Right.
if there's no criminal case, I mean, if there's nothing criminal, the judges probably won't put them on probation because there's nothing they can do as far as criminally, you know, so that gets into a debate.
One of the things that I did just read here relates back to what I was saying earlier, about if that was the only thing that an individual had, was possession of marijuana, and in the past, it would have potentially caused them to be prevented from getting jobs. So this is one of the reasons that I was just reading here behind this particular decriminalization, is so that if people do have small amounts, then hopefully it will not cause them to not be able to get jobs. So that to me is a positive outcome. If somebody's watching someplace enough and say, wait a minute, it looks like you've got a problem here, let's see if we can get you into drug treatment, are you willing to do that so that you can get straightened out?
Does anybody else have any more questions on Capital City Safe Streets? Nope. Okay,
Okay,
what is,
one last one.
oh, I'm sorry, sure.
Of course, Tuesday, August 5th, National Night Out. So, mark your calendars. Tuesday, August 5th. I know Clay Street usually does something, we're gonna have something over at Chambers Park and also over by Annapolis Walk. So look at something for coming out in the daily police report too.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm
Thanks,
leaving my
Sean, so
cards here.
much.
If anybody's interested, go ahead and grab one. You know, I have my email and I have my work phone and cell phone, so feel free to give me a call.
Is the lighting still okay for this? Anybody need more light, want more light? I'm just gonna touch on heroin very briefly here and what we're experiencing. Heroin obviously is something that everybody has seen. I'm not gonna read to you guys know how to read. I don't like people that read me slides when I'm in training. I do not have one in Spanish. I can create one if anybody wants one. But we have seen an increase in the city, and as anybody has seen nationwide, it is pretty much on the morning news, it's on the evening news, it's on the national news, it's on the local news. But we have had an increase in heroin in the city, and most dramatically, probably since November to present, we have had a huge increase in accidents involving heroin use, calls for service for us involving heroin use and or overdose, as well as it seems like every business that you can possibly go in the 7 square miles that we have, there's somebody that's either high, buying, using, or somehow involved with heroin. So we have had a huge spike in the city here, and it's just a little bit of education that I would like to give you guys. Again, I don't live specifically in the city, I live in the county right around the city, but I do come into the city quite often. Corporal Miguez and I actually were at lunch at McDonald's on West Street, and there were 5 addicts in there one afternoon buying. So it's very common in a lot of places that people go to. Again, it's a downer, and your body physically will become addicted to heroin, any opiate-based kind of drug, heroin, morphine, as well as alcohol. Those are things that once you start to use them, your body becomes physically dependent on them, and you continue to need more for your body to survive. If you do not do a medical detox, you could actually die from the overdose of the heroin. Cocaine and other drugs are different. They produce a high, it fills in kind of a neuroreceptor, and then it dissipates. In order to get that same high, you obviously need to use more, but it is not something you will die from if you suddenly stop using it. Alcohol and opiate-based drugs, to include heroin, are. So obviously it is a downer. And again, the biggest things that we're starting to see and stuff that you will see, probably not in the first or second or third time users, but the users that we're starting to see is the dry mouth, the shortness of breath. We'll see a lot of them. I don't know if anybody lives within the Forest Drive corridor. I think probably in the last 2 weeks we've had 9 overdoses within a stretch from Hillsmere Drive to the Safeway, 4 or 5 sometimes people in a vehicle at a time. And it is that shortness of breath. It stops your breathing almost to a slowing. The disorientation, and what we have seen, which is the hyper to the sudden nodding off. We will have where they're Chetty Cathy, and all of a sudden you'll see what we call the Baltimore nod originally down here, which is this, and they will not be able to continue to have a conversation. It will be, so Amy and I were in this. And what we have also seen in the people, when I used to be in homicide, we would go to overdoses, and when people die from an opiate-based overdose, foam will come out of their mouth, and it usually forms the shape of a cone, and we would call that a foam cone. And we would know, sometimes going that would be an overdose that we would look at. We are currently seeing that and speaking to the individuals coming out of their mouth when we're speaking to them. So it is a very high potent dose of heroin that they are using. And obviously the droopy appearance. Some people, because they have shot up so many times in their extremities, hands often are kind of limp and either very enlarged from being shot up so many times, and they just kind of hang. So that is stuff that we are seeing, and that is stuff that you will see here within the city limits on people addicted to heroin. And these are just some common things. It was funny, my husband and son are in the back, and we had gone to the gym one day, and we had gone to Lido's on South Cherry Grove, and I said to my husband, who has retired from the agency, he's probably married now, I think that they're shooting up in the bathroom. But obviously with my son and stuff, I didn't do anything. I had gone back to Lido's the next day, and I talked to the manager, and he said, yes, people had come in and they've been asking us for spoons. And he would hand them the plastic to-go spoons, and they would say, no, we want the metal spoons, not the plastic to-go. So they were kind of tipped in that they had a problem when people started coming into their business and asking for spoons. So those are some of the things. The other things that we're seeing packaged in the city are lottery tickets, the actual Powerball and Mega Millions, broken down and folded very, very small, stuffed in wallets, and the heroin is packaged in those versus the baggies. But we are going back more to the miniature Ziploc baggies that crack used to be packaged in.